when we start talking about technology, we, like Shane says, we get all of our information from the internet. It's, technology is starting to get a bad name amongst a lot of our customers, the people that are buying our products, and even, I've gotten some pushback from some producers and producers' wives in going about my daily life. They figure out what I do for a living, and they'll ask some pretty pointed questions about what we're doing to our food supply. So we've been doing quite a bit of research with growth promoting technologies with these stalker calves for several years. And one of the reasons why we're most interested in this is because we've seen this increase in population growth in the world. There's an increasing middle class in a lot of our third world countries. Whenever people go from a low plane of nutrition to a higher plane of nutrition, they'll start reproducing more. So we're estimating we're going to have to double our food production by 2050. We're limited in the amount of arable land we have, so this increase is going to have to be through technology. 70% of the increase in food production is going to have to go through increased technology because we can't, we don't have any way of increasing the amount of land. We also hear a lot of talk about sustainability. McDonald's, coming up with this plan that they're only going to buy sustainable product. When we, talk about sustainability, a lot of people will focus on, the social aspects or the environmental aspects of sustainability. But real true sustainability is where, the environmental, the social, and the economic aspects of that all come together. And it cannot be sustainable unless it's affordable, along with being socially acceptable and environmentally sound. So the role in technology in beef production, there's a lot of benefits. It reduces production costs. It makes our product more affordable, keeps us in business. It reduces the amount of land needed to produce equivalent amounts of food for consumers, limits production of greenhouse gas required to produce equivalent amounts of food, and decreases food costs to customers. So there's a lot of sustainability in the technology that we use for food production. As far as growth promoting technologies that we're going to focus on and the ones that we have most available to us in our Arkansas parts of the production chain, we're looking at anabolic steroids and lonophores and other factors that change the metabolic metabolism of the cattle. When we look at anabolic steroids, we've been using them for over 50 years. They've been proven to be a safe and effective growth promoting agents. About 90% of all feedlot cattle are implanted at one or more points of their life. This is much lower with stock operations. There was a ag econ graduate student out of Oklahoma State that did a survey in Oklahoma, which has quite a few more stocker operations than some of our states, especially here in South and East. 78% of the large operations implanted their cattle, where about 56% of small operations implanted their cattle. When we look at the benefits to stocker cattle or feedlot cattle, it enhances the lean tissue deposition and reduces the amount of fat. We can get a 10 to 30% increase in growth rate, 5 to 20% increase in feed efficiency, and a 5 to 10% increase in carcass weights. We've done several studies with stocker cattle on wheat pasture here at the Livestock and Forestry Research Station. Here's a study where we used component TEG, which is a combination of testosterone-like hormones and estrogen. With these cattle on wheat pasture in fall and spring studies, we went from about just a little over 2.4 pounds a day, which is really excellent performance with a calf, but we increased that by about 1/3 of a pound a day with this implant. When we look at profitability with our 5-year average economic returns, that increased the net return from about $100 per head up to $120 per head. $20 a head, a lot of, doesn't sound like much, but I talked to a lot of producers, and the same producer will say, well, I'm not in this to get rich, when you start talking about increased profitability. But then he'll also say, but I just don't see how my neighbor can afford to pay so much he does in rent, and I don't see how my neighbor can afford to pay the prices he pays for these stalker calves. So, this is the kind of economic advantage that will make you competitive with your neighbors if you can utilize these technologies. We did a study that was pretty interesting with John Richardson, who's now over at West Texas A&M. We've got Synovex S, which is a estrogen-like implant that's been around for quite a while. It lasts about 120 days. Whenever we brought these steers in to our receiving pens down here at, below the hill, we either did not implant them through the lifetime of the ownership, or we implanted them on day 0, or day 14, or day 28 of the receiving period. The blue bars are the average daily gain of those cattle while they're on wheat pasture. And we can see, we increased our average daily gain by that same about 1/3 pound a day when we implanted on arrival. Increase that a little bit more whenever we delayed our implants. So if we have a finite time that implant's going to pay out, the better gain, the longer into pasture, we'll be able to harvest that later on. The red bar is the total ownership average daily gain, and with receiving and the grazing period, we got about a 2/10 of a pound increase in average daily gain across the whole ownership period, but there was no difference due to implant timing. So this was a 120-day ownership period with the total of receiving and grazing period. No real benefit in delaying implants if you look at the entire ownership period, but as you get later on into the grazing period. So if we have a longer grazing period and we want to have that implant pay out all the way through, then we'll want to delay that implant. When we look at the net return from that implanting program, once again we got that same about $120 per head increase. And that's a pretty good return on investment when it's costing you about $1 to give that implant. Here's a study that we conducted at Southwest Station, and the reason why I'm using this is because this is the kind of thing Don won't let us do here. He likes these cattle to gain a lot of weight and really perform, so he doesn't let us mistreat them up here like we sometimes want to. Here's where we overstock cattle for the winter grazing period on wheat pasture, and the theory is we need to have a lot of energy available for that implant to work, and if we don't have cattle gaining rapidly, they're not going to respond to that implant. In this study, the cattle were stocked heavy enough that they only gained to 1.4 pounds a day, but we got about a 2/10 of a pound increase or 1/4 pound a day increase when we implanted them up to about 1.65 pounds a day. Whenever we look at The high gain cattle, where they were stocked a lot lower rate, they had enough grazable forage to gain about 2.2 pounds a day. We got a 15% increase in body weight gain, about a third of a pound a day. So our response was about the same, whether they were set up for low gain or higher gain. But the percentage increase was quite a bit more whenever they were on a lower gain. I presented some of this data, and one of the questions I got was, what about how are we affecting the food that we're feeding our children, and how are we affecting pubertal rates and age at puberty for children? And whenever we look at unimplanted beef versus implanted beef in nanograms of estrogen per pound, and a nanogram is an extremely small amount of material. Unimplanted beef of a steer contains about 6 nanograms per pound. This will increase if we implant that steer with an estrogen implant. But whenever we look at what we normally would have as ground beef, a lot of our grocery stores would have steaks out of this. An open cow would have a considerable amount more estrogen in it than that, and that's naturally occurring. So, just looking at that, we're not really having much of an impact on estrogen at all. But whenever we look at adding potatoes or peas to this same chart, we're going from 10 to 15 nanograms up to about 200 to 200 or 250 to 300. If we add cabbage to that, we're up at about 10,000 nanograms per pound. And then, whenever you're talking to somebody that's really health conscious, that wants to get completely away from hormones, they talk about the evil milk and how much hormones that contains. So they serve their kids soy milk. So whenever we look at that, just everything else pretty well disappears. So to put all that in context, if somebody ever asks you, what you're doing to the food supply, you can tell them we're not doing, absolutely anything negative to our food supply in using these technologies. So the other one I wanted to talk about with some research that we've done here is using ionophores and other compounds that would alter the metabolic rate of our cattle. These tend to increase the ruminal propionate and reduce ruminal acetate. Propionate goes into the metabolic system and goes to more naturally create glucose. Acetate goes and creates fat, and it's a little bit more efficient to produce for the animal if they produce more propionate and less acetate. So with this, we increase efficiency and energy from the diet. These compounds also decrease the methane and ammonia production, which are the greenhouse gases that are pointed at the beef industry to be detrimental to the environment. As I said earlier, we're seeing 5 to 20% increases in performance and feed efficiency with those. We've done several studies here at Batesville with Rumensin. For the most part, these studies up here at Batesville, we've seen about a 0.2 of a pound increase in average daily gain. GainPro or bambermycin is another compound that has been out for quite a while, but it's been largely forgotten, lost in the mix. And we've got some data here that's showing it's a pretty good feed additive. Get a nice response from it as well. We've also done several studies with some Bovatech products. We have a summer grass study that we got about 0.2 of a pound of added gain with the Bovatech. That same year, we did wheat pasture studies with Bovatech, and we saw absolutely no response at all. So the question goes is, why did we see a response on summer grass with Bovatech and not with wheat pasture? Could it just, in a biological system, we're going to have variation in response to a lot of these things. So it could just be, the Bovatech didn't work and doesn't work on wheat pasture, or it could be just the 500 steers that we ran on this study, just didn't respond the way the textbooks say they should. A lot of the mode of action or the perceived increase in gain could be subclinical bloat on wheat pasture. Rumensin has been shown to decrease subclinical bloat, where Bovatech has no effect on pasture bloat. It will affect feedlot bloat, but not pasture bloat. So, if we have bloat that's not showing up as a ballooned-looking animal, it's subclinical, we can't diagnose it, that still decreases the performance of animals. But when we look at the, added benefit, I was talking to a friend of mine that works for Elanco, and he's like, I talk to producers and they say, well, you're telling me I'll get, a quarter to a third of a pound increase in gain with the implant, and if I feed a Rumensin or an lonophore, I'll get, a quarter of a pound increase in gain from that. Well, pretty soon I won't have to feed those cattle anything because they'll be gaining so much. And, so that there's kind of some disbelief, if we use all the technologies, will any of them work, or how much benefit will we get? So we did some research where we looked at using Rumensin and implants together and what kind of benefits did we get. And here's the study where the two bars on the left are not fed Rumensin. The two bars on the right were fed Rumensin. The red bar is the control where they were not given an implant, and the green bar is where they were given an implant. And whether they were fed Rumensin or not, we got about a 0.4 of a pound increase in average daily gain with that implant. Whether they were implanted or not, we got 0.2 of a pound increase in average daily gain with the Rumensin. So when we added that together, we went from 2.3 pounds a day, which is pretty good average daily gain, up to 2.9 pounds a day with cattle that receive both technologies. And, looking at, that's a $20 benefit with Rumensin, that was a $24 implant effect, and increased net returns of $42 when we use the combination. So whenever we use all the technologies through beef production, what kind of benefits do we get? And there was some modeling done by Jude Capper, and she came up with, compared to 1977, if we think back to 1977, we've had, we were in a similar production system. We had feedlots. We had implants and we had ionophores in 1977. The genetics of the cattle has improved. The milling technology of the diets has improved. The implants have improved, and all of our technologies with feed additives has improved. But with all that together, beef carcass yield increased from about 600 pounds to 770 pounds. That's a 28% increase. Days from birth to slaughter decreased from 602 days down to 482 days. That's a 20% decrease. And so with all that put together, to produce the same amount of beef, we would require, now compared to 1997, we require 30% fewer animals, 70% of the animals, 81% of the feed, 88% of the water, and only 2/3 of the amount of the land. So, any indicator of sustainability would show that we're more sustainable now with all the technologies we've used. We have less impact on the environment. We have fewer animals we're needing to feed and less land required to produce that feed. So whenever we talk about sustainability, we got to remember that any production system can be sustainable. It's just how you manage it. There's plenty of room in beef production or dairy or berries or anything other type of production system for all types. And you know, consumer choice is an important part of our society. So if we have somebody that wants grass-finished organic beef or lamb or you know, I was talking to James about lamb, and I see no need for small ruminants, but James kind of does. So so I guess people, you know, have different opinions on everything. So anyway, technology is and always will be an important part of producing a safe and affordable and sufficient food supply.